Is 3I Atlas just a dirty cosmic snowball drifting through space? Or is it something entirely different? Something built, something watching us as it quietly passes through our cosmic backyard? On the surface, the story sounds simple. Astronomers label it as the third known interstellar object to visit our solar system. A frozen mixture of ice, dust, rock, and gas, the kind of thing we have been studying for decades and comfortably calling a comet. Harmless, ordinary, nothing to see here. But the moment we start looking closely at the data, the story stops behaving. Its path seems too neatly aligned with the plane of our planets. Its tail points in a direction that comets are not supposed to favor. Its composition does not quite match the usual chemical recipe of natural space rocks. And on top of that, there is a clear hint of an extra push in its motion, a non-gravitational acceleration, as if something other than gravity is gently nudging it along. That is where a different question begins to whisper in the background, the one most people feel but are afraid to say out loud. What if, among all the random ice and stone that wander through our solar system, this particular object is not random at all? What if it is not just something the universe threw at us, but a piece of technology sent from somewhere else, on a journey that started long before human beings even learned to stand upright? We know for a fact that space is not only filled with natural debris. We ourselves have launched satellites, probes, discarded rocket stages, and even a car into space. From far away, when our information is fuzzy and incomplete, a piece of technology and a piece of rock can look almost identical. Not long ago, astronomers actually cataloged an object near Earth as a natural asteroid, only to realize later that it was following the exact trajectory of the Tesla Roadster that SpaceX launched in 2018. The only reason we could correct the mistake is because we knew its human-made path in advance. If another civilization had done something similar, far from our reach, with their own machines, we would have no such map to recognize it. So 3I Atlas is not just an icy speck in the dark. It is a test of something much deeper: our humility. When an interstellar object enters our neighborhood, we have two choices. We can rush to label it, squeeze it into the familiar box called Comet, and move on, satisfied that the universe is still as predictable and comfortable as our textbooks suggest. Or we can leave a small but honest space for uncertainty, and let the evidence speak, even if it leads us somewhere unsettling. Because if this object, or any object like it, turns out to be technological in origin, then for the first time in our history, we will be looking not just at distant stars and anonymous galaxies, but at someone's equipment. We will be forced to admit that we may not be the most advanced minds in this galaxy, that we are perhaps late arrivals to a party that started billions of years ago. Before we dive into what makes 3I Atlas so strange, I want you to notice your own reaction. When you hear the phrase interstellar visitor, what stirs in you first? The calm certainty that it is just another comet, or the quiet, uneasy thrill that maybe, just maybe, this is not a rock at all? Let that answer surface honestly. And if you feel like putting a stake in the ground, write in the comments, in simple words, comet or craft. Not because your intuition is proof, but because how you feel about that choice says a lot about the world you believe you live in. In the next part of this journey, we will follow the trail of clues this object leaves behind and ask, step by step, what kind of visitor we might actually be dealing with. To understand why 3I Atlas has become such a point of tension, we need to step for a moment into the mind of one of the people who helped turn it from just a comet into a genuine mystery. Somewhere far from telescopes and lecture halls, a boy grew up on a farm, surrounded not by equations but by soil, weather, and the stubborn honesty of nature. That boy eventually became a Harvard astrophysicist, chair of the astronomy department, founder of a black hole initiative, writer of books about extraterrestrial life and our future among the stars. But the most important thing about him for our story is not his titles. It is the way he insists on doing something very simple that many people quietly avoid: looking at evidence, even when it points in uncomfortable directions. He likes to call this attitude cosmic modesty, the idea that in a galaxy with 100 billion stars and a universe with trillions of galaxies, it would be absurd to assume that humans, living on a small rock that is a tiny fraction of the sun's mass, are automatically at the top of the cosmic food chain. From that perspective, interstellar objects are not just curiosities. They are potential messages about where we really stand. Most of what falls into our solar system is just debris: icy fragments, rocky crumbs, leftovers from ancient collisions. We have catalogs full of comets and asteroids, and generations of scientists have spent their lives describing those frozen, tumbling relics. But in the last few years, another possibility has crept into the conversation: that among the countless natural rocks, there could be the occasional tennis ball lobbed into our yard by someone else. Not a glowing spaceship with lights and music, but a piece of equipment, a fragment, a probe, something that once served a purpose for a civilization that may have existed long before humans ever learned to look up and wonder. We know from our own behavior that space can easily be mistaken for a junkyard of natural objects, when in fact it contains technology. Humanity has already launched enough hardware into orbit and beyond that our own machines now drift among the rocks. Not long ago, astronomers tracked an object passing near Earth and dutifully recorded it as another near-Earth asteroid. Only a day later did they realize that its path matched perfectly the trajectory of the Tesla Roadster that SpaceX launched into space in 2018. What was first logged as a harmless, minor planet turned out to be a car. The only reason we could correct that mistake is because we had access to our own launch records. If someone else, around another star, had sent out their own devices millions or billions of years ago, we would not have that luxury. We would point a telescope at their hardware, see something small and faint and out of focus, and, trained only on comets and asteroids, we would very likely call it just another rock. This is the blind spot that our farm-born professor keeps trying to point at. He argues that most experts behave like artificial intelligence systems trained only on one kind of data. If you feed an AI only pictures of dogs, it will call every animal a dog. In the same way, if you train your scientific imagination only on icy rocks, you will label everything icy and rocky, even when reality tries to whisper that something doesn't fit. His request is not that we declare every strange object alien, but that we expand the training set of our minds. We already know technology exists in space because we put some of it there. The real question is whether we are willing to admit that someone else might have done the same, long before us. And with that question in mind, an object like 3I Atlas stops being a background comet and becomes what it truly is: a perfect test of whether our science is brave enough to say, "This looks strange. Let's not explain it away just yet. Now let's turn our attention fully to 3I Atlas itself, this quiet traveler that drifted into our headlines and then refused to behave the way a polite comet is supposed to." In textbooks, comets are described as dirty snowballs, mixtures of ice, dust, rock, and gas, wandering on long, stretched-out orbits around stars. When they swing close to a star, the heat turns their ice into vapor, and that vapor gets blown away by radiation and solar wind, forming a tail that always points roughly away from the star. This is basic, almost boring astronomy. So when 3I Atlas was first detected and classified as an interstellar object on a path through our solar system, the easy, comfortable label presented itself immediately. It must be a comet. It comes from far away, it has gas and dust around it, it is shedding material, so the story writes itself. But reality very often has more imagination than our categories. As observations accumulated, some details about this visitor stopped fitting so nicely into the comet box. First, there was its trajectory. Instead of slicing through the solar system at some random angle, 3I Atlas moves in a way that is unusually well aligned with the plane in which our planets orbit the Sun. If you imagine the solar system as a flat disk with the Sun in the center and the planets circling around in that thin sheet, this object is not coming in from far above or below the disk, but traveling along that same plane. The chance of a truly random interstellar object just happening to skim our system in this extremely convenient alignment is not impossible, but it is small. More like a 1 in hundreds coincidence than an everyday occurrence. Alone, that might be nothing more than an interesting statistic. Combined with what came next, it sounds more like the opening line of a puzzle. The behavior of its tail made the puzzle deeper. Instead of a simple plume streaming away from the Sun, like most comets, 3I Atlas was observed showing what is called an anti-tail, a jet apparently stretching in the direction of the Sun itself. This feature was not a momentary glitch. Images taken at different times showed the same strange structure, a long, narrow feature extending for around 1 million kilometers, wobbling in a way that reminded some observers of a lighthouse beam sweeping across dark water. For a natural comet, this is highly unusual. Our standard explanations, in which sunlight gently pushes dust and gas outward in the opposite direction, struggle to justify such a persistent, sun-pointing feature. It is as if the object is leaking or deliberately firing material along a very specific direction and repeating that gesture again and again as it moves. Then there is the matter of its composition. Normally, when scientists analyze the material coming off a comet or asteroid, they expect to find familiar mixtures of elements. Nickel and iron, for example, tend to appear in comparable amounts in natural rocks formed in stars and in planetary systems. In the case of 3I Atlas, early analyses suggested something far stranger. The object seems to be shedding mostly nickel, with very little iron. That imbalance does not match what we usually see in naturally formed bodies. It does, however, resemble what we encounter in industrial nickel alloys, the kind of mixtures humans produce on Earth in factories and laboratories. Of course, that does not automatically mean the object is artificial, but it is enough to make any honest scientist stop and say, "This is not what we expected." On top of its path, its tail and its composition, there is yet another layer: the way it moves. When astronomers track an object in space, they calculate where it should go under the pull of gravity alone. If the observed path drifts consistently away from that prediction, something else is acting on it. With 3I Atlas, that something else is clearly present. Its motion shows a statistically strong, non-gravitational acceleration, as if it is being pushed very gently by some additional force. The most conservative explanation is that this push comes from the material it is losing, like a rocket recoiling as it throws exhaust out of its engine. That can happen naturally if ice pockets on the surface are being heated and vent gas in jets. But if you allow yourself, even porum instante, to imagine the technological alternative, the same behavior could also be produced by thrusters or some kind of controlled outflow, the signature of a device rather than a lump of ice. At the same time, it is important to recognize that 3I Atlas is not swooping down toward Earth like a killer in a science fiction film. It is passing extremely far away, roughly 170 million miles from our planet at its closest approach, a distance that poses no immediate physical danger. The drama here is not about impact, it is about identity. Are we looking at a rare, exotic type of natural comet that just happens to tick every weird box at once? Or are we, for the first time, staring at a piece of non-human technology moving through our neighborhood without announcing itself? The honest answer, right now, is that we do not know. What matters is that, instead of shutting the door on that question, some scientists are willing to admit how unusual this object truly is, and to let future data decide whether it belongs to the family of known comets, or stands apart as something that forces us to rethink what can cross the dark between the stars. If 3I Atlas were doing only ordinary things, there would be no tension. The problem is not just the object. It is how we respond when the universe hands us something that does not fit nicely into our existing drawers. For most large institutions, especially the cautious ones, the impulse is to smooth the edges, dampen the mystery, and pick the safest label available. In the case of 3I Atlas, that label is Comet. Official briefings lean on that word with almost comforting insistence. They show blurry images, repeat familiar explanations, and move quickly past any detail that would force them to say the three most honest words in science. We don't know. But the anomalies do not disappear just because the tone of a press conference is calm. The unusual alignment with the planetary plane is still there. The anti-tail that stubbornly points toward the sun and stretches for extraordinary distances is still there. The strange dominance of nickel over iron is still there. The non-gravitational acceleration is still there. Each of these could, in theory, be explained away as rare but natural behavior. Yet, when all of them appear in the same object, the probability that we are looking at something completely ordinary shrinks. What should a genuinely curious scientific culture do at this point? Not declare anything as alien, not jump to conclusions, but also not pretend that nothing unusual is happening. The correct response is to say, very publicly, that this object is puzzling, and to invite as much scrutiny, creativity, and open investigation as possible. Instead, what often happens is a kind of psychological self-defense. Many researchers have spent entire careers treating comets and asteroids as the only category worth considering. To them, suggesting that an object might be technological feels like heresy, a threat to identity rather than just an idea to be tested. They behave like an algorithm trained on one dataset. If you feed it something new, it will still try to classify it as one of the old things, because it literally cannot imagine a third option. That is why voices like Avi Loeb irritate some of his peers so much. He is not demanding that 3I Atlas be declared a spaceship. He is simply insisting that technology be allowed into the list of possibilities, that our mental model of the sky include not just icy rocks and gas clouds, but the faint, unlikely chance that now and then a device moves among them. To make that conversation more rational and less emotional, he proposed something almost disarmingly simple: a scale from 0 to 10, a kind of thermometer for weirdness. At 0, you have a completely natural object, behaving exactly as a comet or asteroid should. At 10, you have something that can only be understood as technological, with maneuvers, emissions, or structures that no natural process could imitate. Every interstellar visitor we discover, he suggests, should be placed somewhere along this lobe scale based on its measured behavior, not on our fears or wishes. 3I Atlas, in this framework, is not a yes or no, not a comet or alien shouting match, but a puzzle whose score might rise or fall as new data arrive. If its jets turn out to be ordinary evaporating ice, if the nickel-iron ratio is revised, if the motion matches what we see in other exotic comets, its rank will slide down toward the natural end. If, on the other hand, we someday watch it deploy something near Jupiter, or measure exhaust speeds that match artificial propulsion more than passive sublimation, its rank would climb. What matters here is less the number and more the attitude behind it. The scale is a reminder that science is supposed to be a detective, not a judge delivering a verdict before the case has been properly investigated. When officials stand at a podium, wave away the anomalies and repeat, "It's a comet," without acknowledging what they cannot yet explain, they are not protecting the public. They are protecting their comfort. A healthier science, the kind we desperately need in an age of deep uncertainty, would look at 3I Atlas and say, "This is strange, and that is exactly why it deserves our full, honest attention." At this point, it is tempting to shrug and say, "Fine, it's weird. But if it is so far away and not about to crash into us, why does it matter?" That question sounds practical, but underneath it there is a kind of fatigue, a habit of thinking that only direct danger deserves our attention. The truth is that 3I Atlas is important not because it is about to hit us, but because it quietly forces us to face a possibility we have avoided for generations. The possibility that we are not alone and never have been. Until now, when people spoke about extraterrestrial life, the conversation usually fell into two extremes. On one side, wild stories, conspiracies, blurry lights in the sky. On the other side, a cold dismissal that said, "There is no evidence, so it is all imagination." An interstellar object that behaves in ways our natural models struggle to explain does not let us stay entirely in either camp. It pushes us back into the uncomfortable middle, where real science lives, open to wonder, but nailed to evidence. If 3I Atlas is nothing more than an exotic comet, then studying it still has value. It tells us what kind of debris exists between the stars, how often foreign objects wander into our system, how strange natural configurations can become. It reminds us that the universe is richer than our catalogs, and that even just a comet can surprise us. But if there is even a small chance that an object like this could be technological, then the stakes rise dramatically. A rock on a collision course is frightening, but in a way, it is simple. It follows physics, it does not choose a target, it does not change its mind. A technological device, by contrast, can maneuver, adjust, observe, wait, and act with intention. It could, in theory, place instruments in special gravitational sweet spots, like the Lagrange points near giant planets, where objects can hover, half-balanced between the pull of the planet and the pull of the star. And it could do all of this on timescales that make human history look like an exhale. Thinking this way is not paranoia, it is responsibility. We already invest trillions of dollars every year in militaries whose main job is to defend small patches of this one planet from each other. If we ever confirm that there are technological visitors moving through our solar system, even rarely, our entire sense of defense will have to expand. Planetary defense will stop being a niche topic and become one of the central questions of our age. How do you monitor the sky not only for rocks, but for devices? How do you tell the difference between a harmless interstellar relic passing through and something that might, one day, decide to look closer at Earth? And perhaps most importantly, how do you prepare without panicking, without turning the cosmos into just another enemy to fear? There is also a deeper, quieter reason this matters. Right now, so much of our energy as a species is spent fighting over borders, resources, and beliefs on a small, fragile world orbiting an ordinary star. We argue as if the piece of cosmic real estate under our feet is the only thing that truly exists. An object like 3I Atlas, whether natural or not, is a reminder that this is an illusion. The Milky Way alone holds hundreds of billions of stars, many far older than our Sun, and the universe is sprinkled with galaxies in numbers our minds can barely hold. In that vastness, the idea that we are the first, the best, or the only technological civilization is not just arrogant, it is statistically bizarre. Interstellar visitors are the universe's way of knocking on our door and asking a simple question. Are you willing to see yourselves as part of something larger? Or will you keep pretending that this small rock and its internal quarrels are all that matters? Atlas, then, is more than an astronomical curiosity. It is a mirror. How we talk about it, how honestly we admit what we do and do not understand, reveals whether we are ready to grow up as a civilization. We can dismiss the anomalies, speak in soothing tones and say, "It's just a comet," to keep the story tidy. Or we can allow ourselves a little cosmic modesty and say, "This could be natural, it could be more." Either way, we should look at it with every tool we have. One path protects our ego. The other prepares us for the day when a visitor arrives and removes all doubt about whether we have neighbors among the stars. We are living in a time when almost anything can be faked, and that makes the search for truth about objects like 3I Atlas even more delicate. Not long ago, a strange thing happened that illustrates this perfectly. An entire YouTube channel appeared, full of videos of a well-known astrophysicist apparently giving bold new statements about aliens and interstellar visitors. His image was there, his voice was there, his mannerisms seemed close enough to pass. People who admired his work started writing to him, asking if he really meant what he was saying in these clips. When he watched the videos himself, he realized almost immediately that something was wrong. The clock on the wall behind him never moved. The tie color was one he had deliberately stopped wearing. The words flowing out of his mouth were sentences he had never spoken. Artificial intelligence had cloned his appearance and his voice, and was now putting ideas into the world under his name, ideas he had never agreed to. He contacted the platform, spoke to journalists, consulted legal teams, and eventually the fake channel was removed. But the underlying problem remained, and it goes far beyond one person's reputation. If we can no longer trust that a video of a human being is really that human being, how much harder will it be to trust videos of lights in the sky, strange objects near the horizon, or distant specks that someone labels craft? In a world where software can fabricate a witness, a voice, even a moving face, the old way of doing UFO stories, blurry footage, anonymous testimonies, shaky cameras, simply is not enough. If we truly want to know whether something like 3I Atlas is natural or technological, we cannot rely on rumors or aesthetic impressions. We need instruments, data, methods that do not care about fear, hope, or clicks. That is the spirit behind a project now quietly scanning the skies with a different intention. In several locations, including Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, dedicated observatories have been set up with a very simple mission. Watch the sky continuously, record everything, and let algorithms sort through millions of objects to pick out what does not behave like anything we already know. This effort, known as the Galileo Project, is an attempt to bring the question of extraterrestrial technology out of the realm of speculation and into the realm of measurable reality. Instead of waiting for leaked videos or covert programs, it builds its own eyes and its own brain, open to the public, driven not by secrecy, but by curiosity. If something unusual moves above us, the goal is to catch it with calibrated instruments, track it, study its light, its motion, its structure, and then share those findings openly. The scientist leading this effort often repeats a simple rule: personal stories are interesting, but they are not enough. He himself has never seen a UFO, never had a dramatic encounter, never been visited by beings from elsewhere. He does not dismiss those who say they have, but he knows that human perception is fragile and memory is soft. Until a claim passes through the filter of instruments and analysis, it remains a story, not a measurement. That same discipline is what he brings to 3I Atlas. It is tempting to declare it alien, just as it is tempting for others to declare it only a comet. Both extremes are a kind of comfort. True science stands in the uncomfortable center, saying, "It is strange. We do not yet know what it is. Let us look harder." In an era of deep fakes and digital illusions, that kind of honesty is rare, and it is exactly what we need if we are ever going to separate the fantasies we project onto the stars from the quiet, stubborn facts drifting among them. There is a question sitting quietly underneath everything we have talked about so far. A question that has nothing to do with telescopes, chemical elements, or orbital mechanics, and everything to do with you, sitting where you are right now. The question is simple, but it lands like a weight on the chest. How do you live your ordinary human life on a small blue planet, if there is even a chance that someone, or something, is watching from the dark between the stars? Not in the paranoid sense of being tracked or targeted, but in the deeper sense of sharing the universe with minds that are older, stranger, and perhaps far more advanced than your own. The US Atlas throws that question into sharp relief because it refuses to let us hide in the comfort of certainty. It might be natural, it might be technological, and in this moment between answers, you are forced to notice how your own mind reacts to that uncertainty. Do you feel fear, curiosity, anger, denial, awe? All of those reactions are telling you something about who you are and about what kind of story you are willing to inhabit. For most of human history, the sky belonged to myth. Comets were omens, stars were gods or lanterns, and the universe existed mainly as a backdrop for human dramas. Then science came and stripped the sky of its symbols, leaving behind orbits, masses, temperatures, and equations. That stripping was necessary. It allowed us to land on the moon, to place robots on Mars, to measure the age of the universe with astonishing precision. But somewhere along the way, many people quietly adopted a belief that was never actually proven, the belief that everything up there is purely physical, purely mechanical, purely indifferent. The idea that another intelligence might have left footprints, machines, or messages among the stars became, in respectable circles, something to smirk at rather than to investigate. Any mention of alien technology was pushed into the same category as superstition and fantasy, not because the data ruled it out, but because it made people uncomfortable. 3I Atlas walks right into that discomfort and sits down. Here is an object that crosses into our solar system from deep space. Its path hints at deliberate alignment. Its tail behaves in ways that do not match our standard expectations. Its shedding of nickel over iron looks oddly industrial. Its motion whispers of forces beyond simple gravity. None of this proves that it is a craft, but it does prove that the universe is still willing to surprise us. The real question becomes, are we still willing to be surprised? The answer is not just an academic matter. It affects everything, from how governments communicate with the public, to how scientists choose research projects, from what documentaries get funded, to what children are taught about their place in the cosmos. When an object like this appears, everyone reveals their reflex. Some rush to declare it is just a comet, as if the word "just" could erase all the strangeness. Others rush to cry, "It must be alien," as if declaring it so could make up for centuries of being ignored. Both reactions share something in common. They are driven more by emotion than by evidence. The difficult, grown-up place to stand is right in the middle. It is to say, it might be natural, it might be technological. We do not know yet, and that is exactly why we must look closely, honestly, and without fear. That position is not satisfying to the part of you that craves closure. It does not give you a neat villain to fight or a clear miracle to celebrate. Instead, it asks for patience, rigor, and humility. It asks you to accept that you are living through a chapter of a story whose ending has not been written yet. That is hard, especially in a culture that wants instant verdicts and strong opinions on everything. But that is also where real power lies, because only from that place can you respond to new evidence without twisting it to fit a conclusion you already decided on. Living with the possibility of extraterrestrial technology also forces us to rethink what we mean by normal life. Right now, perhaps you go to work, pay bills, argue with people online, worry about news cycles and local politics. Your problems feel large because they fill your field of view. Now imagine that one day, perhaps not because of 3-eye Atlas, but because of some future object or signal, the scientific community announces that we have unambiguous proof of technology not made by humans. No speculation, no conspiracy, just hard evidence. A craft, a device, a structure, something whose behavior, materials, or origin cannot be explained by any natural process or any human program. In that instant, every human argument about borders, parties, flags, and ego would be reframed. Our planet would become what it has always been but rarely feels like. A shared home, a small world glowing in a vast and crowded universe. The conflicts that now feel absolute would be seen as internal disagreements inside a single, very young civilization. 3-eye Atlas does not give us that clarity yet, but it invites us to rehearse for it. It asks you to practice holding two truths at once: that your daily life matters deeply, and that you are also part of a story so large that light takes years to cross a single page. That dual awareness is not meant to crush you, it is meant to free you. When you remember that there may be beings out there who have seen stars come and go the way we see seasons, your own worries about embarrassment or reputation or what strangers think of you online begin to shrink. When you contemplate that some other civilization might have launched a device millions of years ago, and that its path just happened to intersect our little system while you were alive to hear about it, your own existence starts to feel like part of a much more intricate pattern. You stop seeing yourself as a random accident on a random rock, and begin to sense yourself as a thread in a tapestry that stretches far beyond anything you were taught in school. There is another layer to this, quieter, but just as important. If we accept that the universe could be filled with other minds, then the way we behave under the sky starts to matter in a new way. Every war we wage, every act of cruelty, every choice to prioritize destruction over understanding becomes part of the story we are silently broadcasting to any watcher, human or otherwise. Imagine that a distant civilization is monitoring this region of space in the same way we are starting to monitor the skies above our own heads. What would they see when they look at Earth? A species so trapped in its own divisions that it can barely look up, or a species taking its first awkward steps toward maturity, learning to unite in the face of larger questions. 3i Atlas is not just a physical object. It is a prompt, a cosmic exam question whispered into our awareness. Are you ready to behave as if you might be seen by minds older than your own? The rise of artificial intelligence deepens this exam. When a fake version of a scientist can speak to millions on a screen, and most people cannot tell the difference, when images of craft or visitors can be fabricated in minutes with convincing detail, you are forced to ask, what kind of evidence will I trust? The answer cannot simply be, whatever makes me feel the way I want to feel, because that is how manipulation takes root. Nor can it be, nothing that challenges my current beliefs, because that is how stagnation sets in. Somewhere between naive belief and stubborn denial lies a wiser stance. Trust instruments more than anecdotes, patterns more than isolated stories, coherence more than drama. When we apply that stance to 3i Atlas, we do not worship it as proof of aliens, but we also do not patronize ourselves by pretending that its anomalies are trivial. We let it be strange. We let it push us to improve our telescopes, refine our models, upgrade our questions. In practical terms, living on a planet that might be being watched means getting comfortable with a new kind of responsibility. It means accepting that planetary defense is not just about rocks, like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, but also about the faint possibility of technological visitors with unknown intentions. It means understanding that space policy, military budgets, and scientific priorities are all part of the same conversation, whether our leaders recognize it yet or not. It also means embracing the truth that you, as an individual, are not powerless in this story. You vote. You choose which ideas to amplify. You decide whether to reward voices that shut down curiosity or voices that keep questions alive. You teach, directly or indirectly, the children around you what kind of universe they live in. A small, closed one in which humans are the only intelligence that matters, or a vast, open one in which humility and wonder are basic survival skills. There is also a more intimate, almost spiritual dimension to all of this, even if we never use that word. When you stand under the night sky and think of objects like 3i Atlas, you are really touching a question as old as consciousness itself. Where do I fit in all of this? If the answer is, I am alone, my species is alone, and everything else is empty, then the universe becomes a silent stage on which humans improvise their own meaning. If the answer is, I am part of a universe that may be full of other minds, some of which have already walked paths we are only beginning to explore, then the universe becomes a conversation rather than a monologue. In that conversation, interstellar visitors are not just random rocks. They are potential sentences in a language we are just starting to decipher. We may not yet be able to read them, but once we admit that the language exists, we can begin the work of learning its alphabet. In that sense, 3i Atlas is less important for what it is right now than for what it allows us to become. It gives us a chance to practice scientific courage. The courage to say, I do not know yet. The courage to publicly discuss anomalies instead of hiding them. The courage to consider technological explanations without collapsing into fantasy. It gives us a chance to practice ethical maturity, the maturity to expand our sense of responsibility beyond national borders, beyond species arrogance, into a broader awareness that our actions echo into a cosmos that might already be inhabited. And it gives us a chance to practice personal growth, the growth that comes from recognizing that your life is both tiny and immeasurably precious. A brief spark in a universe that may be teeming with other sparks you will never meet. So when you hear about 3i Atlas, try not to reduce it to a simple yes or no, comet or craft argument. Instead, Let it be what it truly is for you, a mirror that reflects how you respond to the unknown. You can choose to look away, soothing yourself with the idea that everything is ordinary and always will be. Or you can choose to look back into that mirror and say, I am willing to live in a universe that is bigger than my comfort. That choice will not change what 3i Atlas actually is. The object will continue along its path, following whatever forces guide it, indifferent to our debates. But that choice will change you. It will shift the way you see the sky above your head and the ground beneath your feet. It will turn the night from a ceiling into a doorway. And maybe, just maybe, it will prepare you for the day when an interstellar visitor arrives that leaves no doubt at all that we are part of a community far older and wider than we ever imagined. So, what are we really looking at when we look at 3i Atlas? On one level, it is simply a distant object drifting through our solar system, a small body from deep space that will never come close enough to touch us, never flare dramatically in our sky, never carve a scar across the face of our planet. From that distance, it is almost polite, faint, quiet, unthreatening. Yet the moment we lean in and study its behavior, the picture becomes far less simple. Its path lies suspiciously close to the plane of our planets. Its tail dares to point toward the sun instead of away from it, stretching further than any we have comfortably seen before, and wobbling as if something within it is turning. Its composition hints at patterns we associate more with human industry than with stellar chemistry. Its motion refuses to be explained by gravity alone. None of these things, by themselves, are smoking guns. Together, they form something even more valuable than an easy answer. They form a question that cannot be honestly shrugged off. And in the end, that may be the most important part of this story. 3i Atlas forces us to choose what kind of species we want to be when the universe hands us a mystery. We can be the species that rushes to reassure itself, that polishes every rough edge of uncertainty until the sky feels as dull and predictable as it did before. In that version, this object is declared a comet by habit. Its oddities are buried under technical phrases, and the deeper implications are never discussed outside small circles. Or we can be the species that practices cosmic modesty, that looks up at a sky full of older stars and admits that we do not yet know who or what else might have crossed these spaces long before us. In that version, 3i Atlas becomes a mirror and a test. We acknowledge that it could be a natural visitor with rare, exotic properties. We also keep the door open, just wide enough, to the possibility that one day we will discover an object that is not a rock at all, but a relic of someone else's curiosity, drifting through the same darkness we are only beginning to explore. Between those two attitudes lies the thin line on which real science walks, not blind belief in aliens, not blind faith in nothing to see here. Just the steady, courageous willingness to say, this is strange, and we are going to look carefully and without fear. Whether 3i Atlas turns out to be a dirty snowball or the faintest hint of a signal from another civilization, the fact that we are even able to ask the question without laughing or panicking means something has already shifted inside us. It means we are starting to see ourselves as part of a wider cosmos, not the center of it. And perhaps, quietly, that is the first step toward the moment when we will no longer say, "Are we alone?" as a hopeful or frightened guess, but as a memory of the time before we knew better. If that future matters to you, if some part of you feels that we are standing at the edge of a much larger story, you can let that feeling speak in one simple sentence. We are not alone.